Hey, it's Orange Shy. This is Working with Feeling. Thank you for being here. The topic we're getting into in this conversation is one of those umbrella meta topics. To take a step back, in the last episode with Elizabeth Kristoff, we touched on a number of different things as we were busting some myths around nervous system regulation. And one of the things we named was how making the shift that so many of us want to make can't actually happen without a dedicated ongoing practice. The continuity of our being in the work is something that's a bit of a shift for most of us. If you think about what the traditional model is, what the expectations are when it comes to, showing up to your therapy or coaching session once a week, or doing your workout 3 times a week, or sharing a dinner with your family every evening, whatever the case may be, we tend to compartmentalize when we're being present, whether that's ourselves, our family members, the people in our community. To me, this is one of, if not the most important conceptual evolutions that's required in order to understand what it actually means to work with feeling, to work with the nervous system as an integrated way of approaching life. And this is the reason that I think somatic work is so often misconstrued, misunderstood, and misrepresented, even by long-term practitioners, because it comes back to the way we relate to practice. What does a practice mean? Much of my own evolution as it relates to this has stemmed from my movement practice coming out of the tradition of Ido Portal. I'll include a link in the show notes so you can take a look if you're not familiar. But Ido speaks to this notion of a big P, capital P practice. We can have lots of little practices. We can have the intention of being mindful when we're engaging one activity or another, to show up in a certain way when we're with our team or family, or even with ourselves. We can engage in activities and exercises and apply tools with which we're being present. The difference between a big P practice and these different practices we can all see examples of anytime we open up Instagram or YouTube and open up any self-help or personal growth type of account. The difference is big P practice never ends. It's always here to be exercised. So in some yoga circles, there are conversations around taking the yoga off the mat. And there are concepts like that in many different disciplines and schools. What I found to be the challenge with this is that for most of us in Western cultures, we don't really have a model of what this is. Most of us don't interact often with people who have that level of dedication to being present in every moment. And to me, the fascinating thing about this is that it can seem so abstract, so amorphous, but it's actually the most tangible concept you can connect with. It's being 100% here, as close to 100% here as I can be, not just when I'm focusing on work, not just when I'm with loved ones, not just when I'm washing the dishes, which is the classic example, but when I'm in a conversation with a family member who really knows how to push my buttons, and owning that I'm having the somatic experience of my buttons being pushed, not distracting from it, not popping out of that moment and out of that conversation, not pushing back against that person, but cultivating the ability to be fully here with what's happening within myself, within the people around me, within the environment, and being in active relationship with all of it. This is the meta practice that develops the ability for us to be with whatever's arising emotionally, physically, and to have the capacity to allow it to move through without shutting it down, without turning away from it, without medicating. And that ability is something that more and more people are recognizing is essential when we are so surrounded by technology and media vying for our attention, when we are surrounded by people we care about who are on autopilot themselves and do not have a practice that supports them in breaking out of old patterns and intentionally showing up to every moment in a way that's authentic to and aligned with who they are. This is something that has to be modeled. It has to be felt. We are social, relational creatures. And so it's not something, in my experience, that comes from journaling, that comes from showing up week after week to therapy or coaching. Of course, these things are beneficial, but none of the work that we do on our own replaces the fundamental, essential human need of connection, relating to one another, and the way connecting with other nervous systems, engaging in the type of practice we're talking about, what that opens up for you. Because this is not a concept that is to be understood cognitively. This is a concept to be chewed on through the entirety of our being. In other words, this is something to be felt, to be directly experienced. The question we're living here is, instead of what is the practice I should be doing, what is the exercise or activity I should be engaging in, is how am I showing up to what it is that I'm doing right now? How fully? How do I know how completely I'm showing up to this? How do I discern whether a thought or a behavior is relevant to the reality immediately in front of me and within me versus rooted in old patterns that arose based on what the need was before and what would be most conducive to my survival at that time? Because that's really what we're doing as we're working with the nervous system. We're recognizing the nervous system's primary objective, which is to ensure our survival, first and foremost. If our survival need is met, then from there, it's moving toward things that are rewarding and enjoyable from a neurobiological perspective. But the program that's always running is, how do I ensure my survival? So it's by asking these questions of ourselves moment to moment, learning what does it mean to check in with the body, with the physical sensations, in addition to emotions, which are effectively cognitive descriptors of physical sensations. And then the associated thoughts. What is that like to check in with these layers of our experience? The best way to connect with what that actually means for you is to connect with other people who are engaging in this type of practice. And the best way for you to get the most out of these experiences of connecting with other people with a big P practice of presence is to develop a way of checking in with yourself in the quiet moments at first. I'll often recommend to clients to set up some kind of structure in the environment that reminds them first thing in the morning upon waking and last thing in the evening right before bed, to check in with what's happening within the body, noticing the quality of breath, noticing any physical sensations that are present, what thoughts are on loop, and just moving through in a very neutral, detached way this exploration of what's happening in the layers of my experience. This is helpful to do before bed as a way of getting off the thought carousel, which tends to disrupt people's sleep. And it's incredibly helpful upon waking, before the brain's fully online, before the thoughts have started whirling, and priming yourself to connect with your inner state, which is at the root of your ability to be present with whatever it is that's in front of you. And then from there, we can bring this intentional presence into moments throughout the day. And as we continue building this up, we start to experience in a felt sense capacity the neurological benefits. How returning to presence supports our ability to activate the prefrontal cortex, which is necessary for grounded focus and decision making. How this can quiet activity in the amygdala and prevent us from getting hijacked into stress response. It's so fascinating because this moment-to-moment practice is what opens up our ability to establish this inner state of calm alertness, this idea of nervous system regulation. What does it mean to have a regulated nervous system? It effectively means to be in a state in which you can respond to whatever is happening around you in a grounded, centered way, because you're not in survival mode and your cognition is not distracted by something that's not even happening right now. Autopilot is always going to be part of being human. It's rooted in our nervous system having evolved to perform efficiently. Our brain consumes an incredible proportion of our caloric energy every day. So we need that streamlined functioning. However, we don't want autopilot spilling into the places in life where we want to be creative, where we want to connect deeply, and where we want to feel the full range of what's actually there to be experienced. Now, we touched in the last episode on trauma. Elizabeth has expertise in chronic post-trauma symptoms because it's important to remember that we're moving through and growing through and doing our best within a culture that is largely disconnected and disembodied. We have normalized ways of being that are just not human. Many of us have felt the impact of that in varying degrees of severity at different points in our lives. But regardless, we all are starting from a place where we are going to be swimming upstream, at least in the beginning. So I want to close with a really important flavor of Big P practice, which to me is a softness, a pliability, a bendability, being the tree that bends but doesn't break. There are going to be days where it's incredibly challenging to be as intentional and present as we would like. There are going to be circumstances in our environment that, without our explicit written permission, send us right back to our old patterning. This happens. This is also part of the practice. And the best thing we can do is approach our conditioning and our nervous system just as we would approach a child. Because to me, that's what the nervous system is. It is an embodiment of all of the conditioning that we've accrued over the course of our lives in order to remain safe. These patterns arose in our earliest years of life. And as we have grown into adulthood without this kind of practice to continuously reevaluate the accuracy and applicability of our protective patterning, those patterns become more and more crystallized. Those paths on the hiking trail become more well-worn. And so it's going to be an ongoing process to create new paths, to find the paths that are actually consistent with who we are and how we intend to show up. This practice never ends. There is no there, as far as I'm concerned. There is no, I'm now awakened and not subject to the rules of being a human being in a body with a nervous system in the culture and world that exists today. No. To me, what being awakened is recognizing that the way we've learned to function is not human, and doing our experiments that open up for us within our bodies, within our relationships, within our society. How do we come into connection with all of it and be in relationship with all of it, and do so consciously, intentionally, and from a grounded place, not from a place of needing to protect ourselves, assert our dominance, and so on, but from a place of a deep level of self-sufficiency, a profound connection to creativity, and a lightness that comes from being that tree with branches and leaves blowing in the wind and knowing the weather is going to change tomorrow and the next day after that. The best thing I can do is keep playing my role within this ecosystem. And the best way I can do that is by being fully here. Thank you so much for listening to the end. I hope you will subscribe, leave a review, and share this with somebody you care about, who you might want to have a conversation with about this topic. And if we're not connected on LinkedIn, what are you waiting for? I include the link in every show notes